Hi, this is Karen Sheaffer, and I'm a member of Trinity Lutheran Church in East Berlin. And I was chosen to do an interview of our new interim pastor, Pastor Susan McCarthy. She came to us 2 weeks prior to the coronavirus pandemic shutdown. She was able to do 2 sermons from the pulpit with the congregation in front of her. And since then, we've been isolated and remain at home, but we are able to see our worship service online through Facebook and YouTube. So today I'm going to interview our new pastor, trying to get an understanding of who she is, where she came from, what she plans on doing with us, and just a casual conversation so that all of you can get to know her since we weren't able to by attending church with her. So Pastor, it's wonderful to see you this morning, and I'm hoping we can get through some questions and get to know you better this way. Are you ready?
I am ready. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to start with what's your full name and where were you born?
My full name is Susan Joy McCarthy, and I was born in Wilkes-Barre, up in the Poconos.
Okay.
And I have my mom's sisters' middle names. My mom's sisters are Elaine Susan and Pamela Joy, and so I have their middle names.
That's cool. Okay. And what was your maiden name?
Harless.
Your maiden. What was it?
Harless. It's Harlos.
Okay. That's not an Adams County name.
No, it's not an Adams County name. It's my grandmother always told us it was German from in the Rhineland in Germany, and that it's possible that it was Harlas and it got messed up in the immigration to have the O there. But she wasn't sure about that because she had married into the family as well. So, but I'm German on both sides. A little bit of French, a little bit of Irish, but a whole lot of German.
Well, then you fit right in here in Adams County.
Pretty much.
A lot of German ancestry here.
Yeah.
And are your parents still with us?
They are not. I lost my mom in '99. She was in a car accident, hit by a drunk driver, and my sister and her now husband were also in the vehicle when that happened. Terry and I were engaged, and he had bought the house that we were going to be living in, and they were all coming to help me do things like buy living room curtains and that sort of stuff in preparation for our life together, and they never made it. So it was pretty heart-wrenching, and really was just, it was awful because she also wasn't mercifully killed instantly. She spent 6 weeks on a respirator in Cumberland, Maryland at a hospital. And so it was 5 hours from her house and my siblings, and 5 hours to our house. We were living in southern West Virginia. And so we all had to drive to the hospital to be with her. And it was 6 weeks of nightmare. And then my father passed in the summer of 2003. So I've been orphaned for a good while now.
Wow. And you have one sister then? Any other?
Oh no, I'm the oldest of 5.
Wow.
There's me and my brother Fred and my sister Becky, and that's the first marriage. And so we're full siblings. And then my dad remarried, and I have 2. I call them my baby sisters because I was 17 when the first one was born, and then 19 when the second one was born. So I could be their mom. But I have 2 baby sisters, Tanya and Tiffany. So yeah, there are 5 of us, and we're all on a text chain on our phones, and so we stay in pretty close contact. Especially me and the sisters, we talk a good bit.
Well, you were in Wilkes-Barre. What school district did you attend?
I went to Crestwood, and I was a student at Rice Elementary in New Angola. Yeah.
Okay.
And
And
so
then
then my parents divorced when I was almost 11, and my mom moved the three of us, full siblings, to Center County where her parents lived. They had moved away from the Wilkes-Barre area. And so we moved there near her immediate family in 1980, and I was not quite 11. So then I went from 6th grade through 12th grade at Penns Valley High School District, and I graduated from Penns Valley High School in 1987.
okay.
So that's in
And
Spring Mills. It's just east of State College.
I've heard of the town. Yes.
It is the
Now,
best place for trout fishing in Pennsylvania, I swear.
sounds like a hobby of yours.
Yeah, that's it. We grew up with a creek in the backyard, and currently where my sister's house sits, two creeks come together. And so it's just what you do. You grab your fishing rod, which is always on the porch. There's no reason to put it away. And you go out
Right.
and you get some fish for dinner. And so that's kind of how we grew up after the divorce. And my mom used to do that. She'd put the fishing rods on the porch, and she'd have supper started, and we got off the school bus. We were to go get the rest of it. And so we'd grab the rods and go fishing, and sometimes we wouldn't come home with any supper.
That's called putting the food on the table for sure.
Right. Well, there were always, if we didn't come up with any fish, there were always scrambled eggs or something to add to whatever else she was making. But she loved trout. And so the more we could bring home, the happier she was.
Yeah. Well, then after high school, did you begin college right away or work or?
I did. My first year, I went to Lock Haven University. And then I decided I didn't know what I was going to study, really. I hadn't declared a major. But then I decided to be a language major, and I transferred to Millersville University because they're really known for their language department. So I graduated from Millersville with a degree in English, even though for a while I was a French major. But that didn't pan out. Mostly financially, that didn't pan out because I couldn't spend the year in France that I needed to. So I got a degree in English, and then I went back to Millersville again and got a Master of Education in Counseling. And then I worked not as a school counselor in a public school, but I worked on the college level for a number of years. I was at Millersville, and I was at WVU, and then I was at WVU bought West Virginia Tech, and I switched campuses, still working for WVU, and I worked there and in residence life and in their counseling center. And then the year I met Terry, I took a job at the College of West Virginia as the director of student services. And so that was my career path. Only we were so involved in church all the time. And so it came to be where I was involved enough in church that I was taking off days from my job to do church work. And I had been fighting with God since I was a confirmation student about working in the church and being a pastor. And finally, with Terry's support, he was like, "Why don't you just do it?" And I was like, "You've got to be kidding." And like how I know the Holy Spirit's moving is if I feel like I'm going to barf. And so I know it sounds crazy, but I was like, "Oh no, here's God doing this again." And that whole spring that I was discerning going to seminary, I would think about it, and I just feel like lightheaded and sick. And I said, we have to see if this is possible. So then we still owned our house. Well, I should say he owned our house because he bought it when we were engaged. He owned our house in Southern West Virginia and was still working at the College of West Virginia in their occupational therapy department. And I was making plans to go to seminary. And we were literally 5 hours from Gettysburg or Southern Seminary in South Carolina or Trinity Seminary in Ohio. So I could do commuting about the same distance from either one of them, or I could move into a residential program at either one of them and try to come home on weekends or whatever. And we just didn't know what we were going to do. But he was still working and had the house, and he had been an occupational therapist, but he was teaching in their occupational therapy program. So he had left the practice, but was still involved as an OT. And so this one morning we were talking about, I was still at the college, we were going to work, we were getting things ready and for the day. And he sat down and said, I have to tell you something. And I was like, what? And he said, I'm quitting my job and we're going to Gettysburg. And I was like, ah! It was crazy, but that's what we did. That's what we did. I moved up first to go to Summer Greek to learn the Greek language that the New Testament's written in. And so I was here probably, I don't remember now, maybe 6 weeks without him. And he got a job as the pediatric OT at York Hospital. And so then he moved up and we rented our house for a while. And then a couple years later, it finally sold and that sort of thing. But that's how we ended up in Gettysburg. It was just this crazy morning where we were getting ready to go to work and he just stopped and was like, I've been thinking and praying about this and this is what we have to do. And Gettysburg's where you really want to be. And so that's what we did.
Amazing.
Crazy.
What a path. And
Yeah.
so where did you two actually meet when you were in West Virginia?
We met in Southern West Virginia. Yeah, I was at the College of I was at WVU Tech, and he was at the College of West Virginia, and that's where we met. And so we dated for a year, and then he asked me to marry him in the most unromantic way you could imagine. We were getting ready to go on a date, and we were at his apartment. I had come to meet him there. I forget where we were going. That was the least important thing in the evening. But he had this little gray cat. And so I was giving the cat fresh water. And I literally was walking across his dining room, carrying this bowl, trying not to spill it all over the place. And from behind me, he says, will you marry me? And I turned around and I was like, what? Spilled the water everywhere. And he was like, I was going to ask you tonight at dinner and I just couldn't wait.
He was a romantic from the start.
he was, but he wasn't, because he didn't have a ring. He wasn't ready with the ring. But I was. See, on our second date, he had been married before. And he told me on our second date this story of how it just all fell apart from the very beginning. And she had claimed she lost the ring, and literally she had sold the ring. And anyway, he said on this very early on date, he said, if I ever get married again, which I won't, she's going to have to give me a ring. So when we were thinking about getting married and I was expecting sometime there'd be a proposal, I literally bought him a ring. And it was just because he had said that on our second date, and I wanted him to know that I was in this, and I heard him. You know, I understood what he was talking about. So he asked me this question. I fling the water. I turned around, he's on one knee, and I said, hang on a minute. And I ran to my purse, which was in his kitchen, because I had the ring. And so I came back to the dining room, and I got down on one knee too, and I said, I'll marry you if you'll marry me. And I gave him the ring.
You were definitely meant for each other.
Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah,
Oh my
I think so. So we have a unique story for our engagement story. I had been carrying that thing around for weeks, waiting for him to propose. And I thought, okay, but he couldn't wait. And we're still the same now. If we buy each other a Christmas present or an anniversary present or a birthday present, whatever, he gives it right away, and so do I.
You can't
I bought you something.
You can't wait.
Yeah,
well, did you have a traditional church wedding, or did you elope, or?
Oh no, we had a traditional wedding. We had planned our wedding. This ties in with my mom's death. We had planned our wedding to be in Southern West Virginia, and then when the accident occurred and she died, my sister was disabled by the accident. She still struggles with a whole lot of stuff. We moved the wedding up to Center County, where I went to high school, where my family was, and all that. And I was a mess. And Terry, in the midst of talking about the wedding, we were on a drive from my grandparents' house in Center County back to Southern West Virginia, to where our lives were. And in the middle of the drive, he said, "Do you just want to get married at home?" And so we moved the wedding. And I was married in the congregation where I grew up, which is Salem Lutheran Church in Aaronsburg, Pennsylvania. Yeah, so that's where we got married. And we were married by the same pastor who had just buried my mom. And so she did plus we had a wonderful pastor at our church in Southern West Virginia. So we're still connected to both of those ladies. And yeah, they're wonderful pastors and wonderful support system.
Wonderful. Well, was Terry from West Virginia originally?
No, he was born in New Jersey. And then when he was a teen, they moved to Orange County, New York. So his parents only ever worked in Manhattan. That was where their whole working lives were. So he's not a big city kid in that he grew up and lived in a suburb always. But Southern West Virginia was a shock for him. And it was a shock for me. It's hugely different from anywhere I had lived in Pennsylvania. And so my mom had this ongoing joke that we only got together because we were the two Yankees down
there. That's cute.
Yeah, so she said, if you ever move home, you'll dump him. Which wasn't true.
Now, are Terry's parents still alive?
His dad is. He lost his mom to lung cancer about 4 years before we met. So I never knew her. Yeah. And his dad is alive, still lives in the house that Terry was a teenager in, up in Monroe, New York. And he's since remarried. Yeah.
Neat. Okay, so then you met Terry and you got married, and you're going to seminary at Gettysburg. How about Terry? Where did he go to seminary?
He also went to Gettysburg, but he was 3 years behind me. He spent the first 3 years I was in seminary, he spent working at York Hospital as an occupational therapist. And then when our house sold, he quit at the hospital and went to seminary full time. So he was a first year student while I was a senior. Yeah.
And what was the endearing quality that made you love him?
We joked about the fact that he was boring. I know that makes no sense. He's not boring. He really isn't. But I had been attracted to those adrenaline chasing troublemaker kinds of guys, and had absolutely, terrible relationships in a number of different boyfriends. They just weren't going to work out. And so what I really drew me to Terry at first was that he was calm and secure, and I felt warm around him, and it was just it felt like going home. Yeah, felt like going home. And so he said to me one time, if I'm so different than everybody you ever dated, what is it you see in me? And I said, you're boring. And so that kind of became an endearing term for us.
Sometimes boring is just fine.
Exactly.
So did you go on a honeymoon after you got married?
Mm-hmm. Yep, we spent 10 days in Big Sur, California. And we joked that he's a beach person and I am a woods and freshwater creek kind of person. And we joked that that's the only place in the entire country we could go and both be satisfied, because we were at a state park with a creek running behind our cabin, but we were less than 5 minutes from the beach at the Pacific Ocean. So we really enjoyed that. It was a wonderful, wonderful trip. We had a great time in San Francisco, coming in and going out. We rented a car that turned out to be a Mustang convertible, and we drove it down Highway 1, and just we had a wonderful time. We went whale watching in Monterey Bay and ate a lot of seafood and hiked. One time one time we hiked up this mountain where there was supposed to be a spectacular view of the Pacific Ocean, and we hiked right into a cloud where 3 feet from one another we couldn't even see each other. It was so we hiked. It was like a 5-mile hike, and we were up there, and we sure didn't see the ocean. It was a wonderful trip. It was really great. Called my grandparents from a payphone underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. That was fun.
Oh.
And we said, we are as far away from you as we can get and still be in the same country. Well, we didn't count Hawaii, but
Right.
yeah, in the continental US. That was fun.
So your first home together was in West Virginia, and then you moved to Gettysburg. How many other times have you moved?
Well, that's a complicated question. We moved a bunch for seminary because your first 2 years you spend on campus, but then you move away for internship, and then you move back to campus, and then you move for your first call. And so, let me think. That's a tough question. We moved from our house to the apartment at seminary, and then my internship we spent apart because he was still working in York and my internship was up in Mount Union, Pennsylvania. And so I was in the parsonage in Mount Union, and Terry had an apartment in York, and we remember this year as both blissful and devastating for a number of reasons. But we lived apart during the week. He worked 4 10-hour days, and he'd come home on Thursday night to me at the parsonage, and then we'd spend 3 days together, and then he'd leave about 5 in the morning on Monday to get back to work in York, and then he'd spent those nights in York. And I'm not great at having a roommate. In a couple of days, we'll be married 20 years, and I'm still not great at having a roommate. So I loved having that big parsonage to myself all that time, and then having those intense get-togethers with him on the weekend where we explored all kinds of state parks, and we hiked, and at the time we had this huge dog who was the center of our world, and we were close to my family, so we spent a lot of time with our niece and nephew who we're really, really close to. And so it was a good year in that sense. It was the most heartbreaking year because we've had, ever since we got married, we had fertility issues. And so, surprise, surprise, while we're getting ready to go on internship and arriving at internship, we discovered I was pregnant. And we had been married 7 years with no babies, no anything. And so it was rough. And then I lost the baby. And so it was good in some ways to have that time the way it was laid out with the separation and then the togetherness, but we each ended up mourning that pregnancy kind of by ourselves because we spent so much time alone, and it was the only pregnancy that we ever had, and so it was awful. It was awful, and there's no way that society provides to like commemorate that kind of loss. You know, there's no death certificate, there's no ceremony, there's no viewing. You have to really search everywhere to find even a miscarriage kind of card. It's awful. It's just awful. And so that was a good year and a bad year in many ways. So that was a move, and then we moved back together again. My senior year of seminary and his first year, and we actually got the same apartment that we were in. So the dog liked that because the dog was familiar with where he was living. Then we moved into town on Middle Street in Gettysburg when Terry was in seminary. Then we moved out to Bender's Church and into their parsonage in Biglerville, and we lived there for 7 years. And then Terry had a stroke, and so we couldn't live in there anymore because the bathroom was upstairs, and it was a steep, narrow staircase, and there were no bedrooms downstairs, and the tiny little house that we loved to live in, but it just wasn't going to work for his physical capabilities. So lickety split that summer, we bought a double wide in Heidlersburg, and had a ramp and deck built. Actually, a bunch of churches pulled together in the Gettysburg Conference and Hanover Conference to build a deck for us and a ramp so that Terry could get in and out. And so we've been there ever since, never expecting, to do it, to do anything like that. I remember the night that Terry had the stroke, we were in Gettysburg Hospital, and we did a teleconference thing with the neurologist in York Hospital. And he said, okay, we're going to bring him down to York. He'll be in the ICU for a while. And he said, ma'am, what are you going to do? And I was just thinking about taking care of Terry. It's all I could think about was taking care of Terry. And I wasn't thinking about the immediate time frame. And so when he said, ma'am, what are you going to do? I said, I have to buy a house. He was like, you don't have to buy a house tonight. What are you going to do tonight? And I was like, oh, I'm coming to the hospital also. But that's part of our story and how we ended up in the mobile home park where we are, because I said we don't have time for the mortgage stuff and the getting everything all set to make a house handicap accessible and all that. I said we have to buy what we can buy. And I said, honey, I hope you're okay with this, but I'm going to buy this because it doesn't cost any more than a fancy new car. Because I mean, he was at this point getting worse, because after the stroke, he wasn't in such bad shape. But then once the damage sort of set in, and we knew he was going to lose the loss of his left side of his body and that kind of thing, he really couldn't be involved in most of that. And so he spent that whole summer and early fall at the Brethren Home and at Health South in Mechanicsburg and whatnot. And so when he came home for a, what do they call it? I guess it's like a home visit with the therapists where they evaluate. Yeah. When he came home for that, the one therapist, as they came in the door, said, so what do you think, are you in the house? Do you like living here? And Terry said, I don't know. I've never seen it before. He'd been in care that whole time, and I had sent him pictures and showed him pictures and said, this is what's going on, and here's what the deck looks like. And they had to tear out this. It was beautifully landscaped when we bought it, and they had to tear all of that out. And so he would virtually live through all that stuff when we moved into the house we're currently in. So that's a long answer to your short question about how many times we've moved, but.
Well, you touched upon not being able to have children, but you have Luke. What's Luke's story?
Oh my gosh, you just can't imagine Luke's story. We have friends from Bender's Church who think that Luke's story should have been on Oprah. It's a cool story. We had talked about adoption. Terry is adopted, and so are both of his siblings. And we had talked about it, but Terry was hung up really pretty strongly on the cost of it, because there were fees when he and his siblings were adopted, but it was different. It wasn't $30,000 or whatever. It was like $250 to process the paperwork. And he said it just feels like you're buying children, and he hated that. Just said there's just no way we can do that. But I desperately wanted to adopt a child. So we had been to some adoption meetings. We talked about financing for it. We had all these complicated conversations with social workers and agencies and whatever. And I had just started my first call at Bender's. I was recently graduated and recently ordained. And Terry was in seminary full time, and his birthday's August 5th. So August 5th, we said, let's not have a conversation about this again for a year. We'll give it a year. And we said, we're going to let God work stuff out. And Terry literally said to me, it's not like God drops babies from the sky. So I dare you to dare God. Because a couple weeks went by, I established a Bible study that Bender's hadn't had. We started talking about different scriptures to study, and up came the one where I could look up where it is, but God gives you a spirit of adoption, and so we're all adopted into this promise with Christ, and now I feel like a lousy pastor because I can't name the scripture right now.
All
but
right.
but we studied that scripture. And so we're having this conversation at Bible study on Thursday night, and we share with the congregation that we've decided not to pursue adoption, at least for a year. We're not going to talk about it again for a year. And that conversation probably took place the last week in October, maybe. It was, so we had made the decision not to talk about it in August. We shared it in October. And then I was doing a home visit on Monday, the 20th of November. And the pastor who married us called me. And I knew that it was a message from her. I silenced the phone. I was in the middle of a visit, but I knew. I don't, like, it was like the Lord told me. I knew what was going to happen. And so this whole time I'm finishing the visit, we were saying our goodbyes. So it wasn't like I rushed through the visit or anything like that. I wouldn't do that. But my anxiety and tension just kept building up. I knew I had to get back to the car and call her. So from this lady's driveway, I actually called Terry, and he answered the phone, and I said, Karen called me. And he said, I talked to Karen. And I said, it's a baby, isn't it? And he said, she knows about a little boy who needs a home. And I'm crying telling you about it. And I locked myself in our bathroom. He said, come home. We have things to do. Call off the rest of the day because we've got to do this. We have to find a lawyer. We have the phone number for the birth mom. We have to talk to her. So I get to our house, and there was this bathroom off the kitchen, and I couldn't even go in the house. I was such a wreck. I was shaking. I was bawling. I even locked him out of the bathroom. And I didn't do it on purpose, but I just couldn't. I couldn't pull myself together. I just absolutely couldn't. So we finally got ourselves together enough that we called Luke's birth mom. Her name's Tanya. So we called Tanya, and she had a plan for Luke, and it fell through. And she said, I'm doing 5 weeks, and I have no plan for this baby. She said, I don't feel like I'm his mom. I never intended to get pregnant. I just want him to have 2 parents. And so the long and the short of it is, I said, well, I'll hire a lawyer, and we'll see where we go from there. So that's Monday. So I hired the lawyer, sitting in Sheetz parking lot in Hanover. That's when she called me back. Terry had gotten on the internet and found some people. And the one who called me back, we ended up hiring. And so she said, okay, I'll do some initial information with Tanya. So Tuesday, she made an interview with Tanya on the phone, got initial information, and said, you know, we're good to go in this process. Wednesday, she finished the information with Tanya, called us and said, have a great Thanksgiving tomorrow. Things are looking good. And she said, we've got the birth father on board to sign some papers as well. And we had plans to meet Tanya and her mom on the next Monday. And so that would be the 27th. And the lawyer said, take her a little present. She had a daughter that she had when she was 15, who's Luke's sister. Her name's Katia. And she said, the little girl will probably be with her too. Take her a present. She said, it's like dating. She has to be comfortable with you or she's not going to give you this child. So we're all nervous about the coming Monday and whatever. It's Wednesday and we're having people over for Thanksgiving. So we're up early the next morning, get the turkey in the oven. And just as we start to gather around the table for like a noontime meal, the phone rings and it's the lawyer. She's not supposed to be calling me. I mean, it's Thanksgiving Day. She was calling from her mother-in-law's house. And so I answered the phone thinking I'm going to be sick because something's wrong. So like this birth mom is pulled out. We're not going to get this little boy. I don't know what's going on. And so I said, hello. And she said, Susan, this is Denise, and I'm calling you with an urgent situation. She said, this is not an emergency, but you are having a baby. And I was like, yeah. And she said, right now, she is at City Hospital in Martinsburg. She is 6 centimeters dilated. This little boy is coming. And here I am, a brand new pastor, and all I can think of is the fact that I have my first congregational funeral on Friday. And I said, I have a funeral tomorrow. And Denise said to me, Susan, you're having a baby. Someone else has a funeral tomorrow. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're kidding me. You're kidding me. So, so we left everything. We left my family, we left our friends, and we just left the Thanksgiving dinner. Jumped in the car in Gettysburg. We go flying to City Hospital. We named the kid in the car. We had talked over those couple of days. We'd talked about a boy name, and we didn't know, what it would be. We sort of had settled on Luke, but we weren't certain. And Luke Benjamin is his name. Well, we have a godson named Benjamin, and there was heartbreak and adoration there because his mom and I were having a baby together in seminary. She's a classmate of mine. And so when Ben was born, after our child had died, I was afraid it was going to be hard to love Ben. But what Ben taught me was that I could just keep him. And so Ben taught me that I could adopt. And so on the way to the hospital, on the way to the hospital, we called them and we said, can his middle name be Benjamin after Ben? So we're the godparents of Benjamin Jacob, and then we named Luke Benjamin. so that's the story. When we got to the hospital, it was 4:45, and he was born at 4:49. So we were barely there in time, and then we were in this waiting room, and nothing was going on, and nothing was going on, and nothing was going on. And Tanya was with her mom, Pam. We knew that it was Tanya and her mom who were at the hospital because the lawyer had told us that. And so it was probably about an hour in the waiting room when we were still wanting to know what was going on and how was he and all that. And this woman walks into the waiting room, and I stood up and hugged her, and we hugged, and she was crying and I was crying. And then I was like, you are Pam, right? And she was like, yeah, you're Susan, right? And so we were like, yeah, that was we could have been perfect strangers, but the Lord had drawn us together in that moment. So she took us to see Luke in the nursery for the first time. They had kept him with Tanya because he was so early. His blood sugar wouldn't stay up and his temperature wouldn't stay up. And so she took us to see Luke in the nursery. And Luke's favorite part of the story is we did this paperwork to go into the second room to actually physically touch him. And so instead of saying, when the nurse gave me my driver's license and all that stuff back, I didn't say to her, okay, can I go in or are we finished or anything like that. I said, can I touch him? And she said, well, you're his mom, aren't you? And so Luke loves to tell that part of the story because he said, Mom, you weren't smart enough to know you could hold your own baby. Yeah, so from one Sunday to the next, we learned of a child and got the child. And I was supposed to be off on that Sunday. It was my first Sunday off was Thanksgiving weekend. And instead I went to church. I called the supply pastor and I said, I've got to go to church and I've got to tell everybody this. So I took pictures of Luke and a little tiny Pooh Bear that he was in the pictures with, so they could see kind of the size of him. Like here's the Pooh Bear, and see how little he is against the Pooh Bear. And so I hadn't had sleep in 3 days, and they were like, what is wrong with her? And I just got up and made the announcement. And so he couldn't come home because we had no agency. We had nothing was in place. We'd had no home study. So he was in West Virginia with us. Pastor Karen, who married us and hooked us up with the birth mom, we stayed at her house with her and her family, and commuted back and forth to both seminary and church as we needed to. One of us had to be with him at all times legally. So we literally tag teamed him, and we couldn't bring him home until we got approval from both the state of West Virginia and the state of Pennsylvania. So we got approved to bring him home the day after Christmas.
Oh my goodness.
So that was another move to answer that question. We were in West Virginia temporarily. So yeah, we've had a lot of times in our marriage and our life together where it's God working and not us. Yeah. What a neat story.
Big time intervention there. I mean,
Yeah.
you couldn't have scripted that.
No,
No.
no. You
And now,
can't make this stuff up.
and how old is he now?
13.
13.
13, 7th grade at Biglerville Middle School. I guess they
And
call it Upper Adams Middle School. So yeah.
and they have online school right now as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as a family, what's your interest, your hobbies, your fun times?
Well, we love to be in the woods, and we have a camper. We also love Sebastian, Florida, and we go there as much as we can, which is not very often, just because of Terry's health and my health and congregational obligations. And a couple of times we've planned trips and weren't able to go, but we discovered Sebastian when I was in seminary, and we camp at Sebastian Inlet State Park, and we took my brother's kids, my niece and nephew that we're so close to, we took them with us. And since then, we've also taken Luke. And so we get our beach time in Florida when we can. Last time we were down, though, we went to St. Augustine instead. And that was like a history lesson besides. That was great. So we like to do that. What else? I'd say we play a lot of board games, because Terry and I did for years and years and years, but we just don't anymore. We don't do that. Terry and I like to read. Luke's not so much a reader.
Does he do sports?
I'm sorry?
Does Luke do any sports?
Oh, yes. He is a baseball player. Yes. And we love to go see the Harrisburg Senators and the Washington Nationals. So it was great last fall when the Nationals won the World Series. That was great. Luke has played baseball since he was 4, and he played t-ball, and he loves it. He used to play fake baseball even as a 2-year-old. He'd swing at nothing and run around the kitchen like he was running bases and slide. He don't slide too much anymore. I think he's big enough now that it hurts when he lands, but he used to slide into everything. He loved that.
And what's his position on a team?
Well, he's been a catcher for years and years and years, but he's a lefty, so he doesn't have quite the right angle to be whizzing the ball where it needs to go most frequently. And so being a left-handed catcher is a lot harder. But he has an incredible arm, and so he's been put in the outfield. And he doesn't like that so much because it's not where all the action is. But he can play center field and whiz the ball into home plate. I mean, so that's why he gets put out there. Yeah, but he's a pretty good hitter. He's not the greatest, fastest runner, but he loves it, and that's the most important thing.
Right. And where the first church you were hired at was Bender's in Biglerville?
That was where my first call was. I served an independent internship at St. Luke in Mount Union my internship year. They call it a detached site. So I was on my own there with a supervisor about an hour away for internship. I did that for a year. And then I served Lazarus Lutheran Church in Lineborough, Maryland, my senior year of seminary. And I did that. That was a full year appointment. And then Bender's in Biglerville was my first call. And then in 2014, February of 2014, I took a second call, which was still with Bender's, but added St. Paul in Biglerville to my workload. And it's really, I've spent the past decade working in Upper Adams to form a co-op with some of the smaller churches up there. And they're still operating. It's called UACT. It's Upper Adams Christians Together. And it's Lutherans and mostly UCC. Sometimes other congregations are involved in different ministries that UACT does as one, but I spent a lot of time working on that. And so one of the steps to bringing UACT together in worship-wise was drawing these two congregations together. And so that was a big project I was working on until I ended up not working. And that was a struggle.
Because of medical leave. You had to have a medical leave. And and how long was your medical leave?
It was 2.5 years almost. I didn't count the months. I could count the months, but what happened was in March of 2017, I broke my foot, and I don't know where and how I did it. There's no memory of injury or anything like that, but I had done a funeral, and I came back to the office and kicked my shoes off. Now, when I looked down, my foot was swollen. And I said to the church secretary, I said, I don't know what I did to my foot, but it's all swollen. I just don't know. And that was Saturday. So then, of course, I still walked on it on Sunday. I didn't have a lot of pain or anything. I had it wrapped, and I led the services on Sunday morning and did all the things. And Monday discovered in an x-ray that, yes, indeed, it was broken. So I was in a boot for a while, but it wasn't healing. And so by July, I was having a low-grade fever and a different sort of pain in it. And I ended up in Gettysburg Hospital for a week. And I had a surgery there, and they confirmed that I had osteomyelitis in the bone, which an osteomyelitis is a bone infection. So they operated on my foot then, and I had at-home intravenous antibiotics for, I forget, 12 weeks or something like that. And into the fall, it went into remission. I learned that osteomyelitis does not get cured like some infections. It goes into remission like a cancer. And so I was in remission by December. By January, I started physical therapy. I was all ready to go back to work. I figured I'd be back to work by Easter. And then I had another foot ulcer. And sure enough, through MRIs and stuff in the spring, we discovered that it was back. So I had a second procedure, and that would have been the summer of 18. I had a second procedure, same thing that whole second year. More at-home antibiotics, into remission, the nuclear scan test is clear, I'm good. January comes, I'm starting physical therapy. I'm in better shape by April again. I think I'm going back to work, and it's back again. So we spent the whole summer of 2019 in July. I ended up at Hanover Hospital for 11 days, and they amputated the bone. And so that means I lost my pinky toe and the whole outside bone of my right foot. And so that recovery then took forever, not because I was still battling infection, but because, one, I'm diabetic and we don't heal that well. But that was the least concern of my doctor. More concern is that because I walk out on the outside of my foot, what was growing all the time was callus and scar tissue. And so it would close, and then every week he would open it. Not to be too graphic, but it just wasn't healing like it was supposed to heal. So then I was to start physical therapy in January, and I had about 3 sessions. And then I had trouble again where it still wasn't healed. And so right up to my beginning at Trinity here the 1st of March, I had I think 3 sessions of physical therapy. And then boom, it was time to be here. So I have come to you with all of my weakness and all of my illness. And then I had these outpatient physical therapy plans, but outpatient physical therapy has been canceled the same way that our worship services have been canceled. So I'm trying to build stamina. At the same time, I'm trying to get to know the congregation and manage this online stuff that I just couldn't do without Jen. I'm telling you, Jen is the best, and she understands all this wonderfully.
Yeah. So you arrived at Trinity and you were able to preach from the pulpit 2 times with a congregation in front of you. And then all of this changed with COVID-19.
Yeah.
And what was your immediate feeling when we got the word that we will no longer be able to meet as a congregation?
I was just stunned. I think disbelief was probably the best word for it. I just couldn't imagine how we were going to function and do this. And I mean, I knew we could put out a video that people could watch, and that's quickly what we did. Bob King helped me do that. I didn't even know how to record something on the computer prior to his instruction on how to do that. So I think we've come a long way since since then. But I just couldn't believe it, and it felt like I had just left 2.5 years of quarantine myself from my health stuff, and now we were all quarantined. And so God and I had a few words about people being kept from one another, and in particular, I took it personally. I thought, come on, God, I just got out of the house. Yeah.
And now you took my people from me.
Exactly. These new people that I could get to know and love, and I can't. And so that's been frustrating.
Well, what has been the biggest challenge when this happened?
I think not gathering overall. I mean, I'm a people person, and the loss of connection, I feel like I'm dropping the ball everywhere because I don't know people, and I don't know what to pick up where, and who needs a phone call, or who we should have heard from in the last 5 weeks that we haven't heard from, and because we don't have those easy conversations going out of worship and coming into worship and at social gatherings and at meetings and all those ways that people share information, it's kind of like being in the dark, and that's been challenging. Yeah, it's like I described it to a group of people the other day as being given this 18-wheeler full of good news. That's what I'm supposed to deliver, the good news. And I have the truck, and it's full, but I don't have a map and I don't have keys. And so I don't know how to drive this truck to people because I don't know which direction, and I can't even start the engine. But I think we're getting the engine started. The more the more we do electronic stuff, and we have plans now to make phone calls to those folks who are getting the at-home bulletins and make sure that that's the best way to connect with them, and so it's setting new systems in place so we can be a fruitful and healthy and caring congregation. That's been a big challenge. Yeah, because I don't even know who to begin with, who some of the good resource people are for that. So I feel like I finally know who to call for if I'm having a disaster or something.
Right.
Yeah.
And what was the biggest triumph so far since this has happened?
I think those gorgeous worship services that Jen and her daughter put together. We are really shining, and I learned. I've been also putting them on my personal Facebook page, just because I want to put them out there. I'm really proud of the work that they've done, and I think it's important to share that stuff. And this past week, I didn't. I don't know if I forgot. I posted it several different places, sent it to different people, and I don't know if I forgot Facebook or if it didn't load and I closed Facebook too quickly. But anyway, several families from Biglerville got in touch with me and said, we can't find your worship service for this week. And I said, I didn't know you guys were watching my worship service. And they said, oh yeah, we haven't missed it ever since you went back to preaching and put it on. And I said, oh, well, let me post it. So I had to go back to my Facebook page and find the link and make sure it was up there. So I think that knowing that we're reaching people that we maybe wouldn't have reached, and like 2 of my mother's cousins sent me a message on Facebook saying, you have such a beautiful worship service. And I thought, I didn't even know you knew I was a pastor. So we're reaching people. We really are, and I think that's a triumph.
That's a big triumph.
Yeah,
it is. And they need to be reached. Yeah, because I think the isolation feeling is large, and it does help. So how are you holding up personally during all these times?
I'm tired, and I'm tired in new ways. Like usually I know the flow of like like Sunday afternoon, I'm not the best to talk to because I've been exhausted by the morning or that kind of thing. I know that flow. I know normal ministry tiredness. I know where, where the highs are and where the lows are given what's going on and that kind of stuff. And with this, I don't know. And the exhaustion comes out of nowhere. And it's like I just another Zoom meeting or it's so difficult to set a meeting via email. Like, normally we take 5 minutes after church and say, yeah, we got to talk about this. Let's get together Tuesday night, 7:00, and it's done. But I've learned you can spend an entire day emailing 8 people just trying to set up a Zoom meeting. And then you might have to teach 2 of them how to use Zoom. And it's, it's like these new things are coming from different directions. And so you don't know where your energy is going to be drawn. And so I'm tired in new ways that I didn't expect, if that's a long answer to a short question.
Yeah. And you're still healing from when you were on medical leave. So
Yeah.
you have double whammy.
Yeah, in some ways.
So
And
don't
poor
be hard on yourself.
Yeah.
Take time.
And I'm hard on myself. But poor Terry, like I come home and we'll have dinner and maybe a Zoom meeting through the seminary for his work, or I'll have Bible study or a meeting or whatever, and he'll want to sit down at 9:00 and watch a TV show together and just have some social family time. And I'm like, I'm sorry, honey, I'm going to bed. And I'm just out.
Oh, well, what is one thing you like to do to unwind, relax?
Well, I would say crochet, but I did so much of that during my own confinement that I don't care if I hold yarn for another year. If anybody needs yarn, right now we have a camper. Right now my camper is storing bins and bins and bins of yarn. So if you want some yarn, let me know. It's for free. But I love to read. I found when I was sick, I had a hard time focusing on reading. So I've kind of picked that back up again now, and I enjoy that. And I enjoy ridiculous, mindless shows, ones that are like old sitcoms that I can just turn on the Golden Girls and go to bed and I sleep with it on. It drives Terry crazy, but I love that stuff. And I've been watching The Bachelor of all things. It's crazy. I mean, normally I listen to NPR, I watch PBS. We love documentaries. Nature shows were a huge thing when Luke was little. I mean, just kind of, I want something with a little bit of substance and education and history and that kind of stuff. Not lately. Lately, the more mindless and entertaining, the better. So that's what I've been doing. It's my niece makes fun of me. The Bachelor's on Monday nights, and she'll call and say, "So are you watching your terrible show?" Yes. Yeah.
Name one thing that you discovered about your husband, your son, your family since this pandemic has started. Something new that you discovered.
They're more impatient than I realized. Really, the 2 of them, they're more impatient. Terry's at home, working from home, alone all day. And if Luke doesn't stay home with him, he comes here to Trinity with me. And he's done school from the front parlor. And they both want what they want when they want it, and I'm like, how about you let me alone and get it yourself? But they're impatient, I think, because they're isolated in their own ways. Yeah, and that's a new thing. I never would have said that they're impatient. I don't mean to be negative about them, but they both are.
I think every family has discovered a new dynamic since this all began.
Yeah.
I could ask that question to any family and there would be, oh yeah, I discovered something new.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what brings you joy?
Oh, conversations with people, Bible study. I love Bible study. Um, hearing truth. I mean, I would say hearing a good sermon. I mean, that brings me joy. It fills me with all kinds of things, but but truth spoken, even if it's not Bible based. What else? Walks with my dog. We have a little spaniel mix. Her name's Amy, and I love when she's happy enough that her ears kind of perk, and that brings me joy. And I'm allowed to go to work in the morning. She does not make any move to try to come with me. But if I come back into the house for anything, even if I just forgot something, it's her turn. And so that's what she thinks. It's her turn. And so I have to be real careful when I leave in the morning not to have to go back in, because all I have to do is say the word go or stand up or touch the car keys and she's ready. And so she brings a lot of joy to me. I love to take her places. She likes to go through McDonald's drive-thru and get chicken nuggets. Yeah, I also like to mow the grass. I love to mow the grass, and I mourned that when I wasn't able to be on my feet at all. I love the clean line. You can see something getting done, and the smell of the fresh grass. I love that.
That's cool. Well, then, a complete opposite. What brings you to tears?
Oh, a lot. I think right now this virus brings me to tears, and not just the death. I mean, the death is horrendous. That there's this virus we can't treat and people are dying from it. That's a whole thing in itself. But the isolation and the loneliness and the ways that I feel like we're not communally meeting one another's needs the way we normally would, because we can't, and like Mother's Day, Luke made pot pie, and that was exciting. And then I had a whole ton of pot pie, like 11 quarts. So I delivered some to some friends on porches and whatnot, and I cried because I couldn't hug people who have been like a mom to me or like a grandma to Luke, and and that kind of stuff. And I think the isolation, the loneliness, like all the secondary effects from this disease, that brings me to tears. Yeah, and a good animal movie. Like if I watch a movie about a dog and the dog dies, forget it. I'm done for the rest of the day. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, a lot of typically emotional stuff gets me. Yeah.
What do you miss the most since this pandemic has started? What have you missed doing the most?
Going to see a movie by myself. It's a thing that I started doing, gosh, probably not long after I started at Bender's, but it's after a particularly rough week where there are no days off, and there's no days off in the coming week till the end of the next week, and that kind of thing. I love to take an hour or so, or I mean a couple hours or so, and just go to the theater and see a movie that Terry's maybe not particularly interested in or something. And I learned that you can go and see a movie by yourself and it's perfectly comfortable. And so I've done this so many years that regularly for a Christmas present, I get a movie gift card. And he'll say, it's for those Friday afternoons where you sneak away. And so with the theaters closed, I can't go do that. And that's nourishing, because it can be a meaningful story, or it can be completely fluff. I've seen all kinds of things all by myself that no one's been around, even in the theater. And I just walk around eating my popcorn, watching the movie. I love that. I love that. And with the theaters closed, I miss my movie time.
That's a good thing to miss. And hopefully we can all get back to the movies soon. And what should change in this world after this pandemic is over?
I think we should be kinder to one another. Yeah. I think we should be kinder. I think we mess up enough and hurt each other's feelings without trying. Just because we're all different and have different thoughts and different opinions and different ways of operating and all that. And I think the cruelty has to end. We've come to a place where if people disagree, they hate one another. And that's another thing that brings me to tears. But it's got to stop. It has to stop. And I was hoping that people would care for one another enough that this pandemic could heal some of that and bring us together. And instead, we're just fighting over masks now.
Yeah.
And I want that to change desperately.
That's a good answer. And in Trinity itself, what do you think should change when we come away from this?
Oh my gosh, I don't know Trinity enough to be able to answer that. I really don't. My experience so far is that it's a warm and welcoming congregation, and I'm really impressed with the outreach ministries that the congregation has. Terry and I chuckled the other day because I was editing a thank you letter for Jen. She'd emailed it to me, and he called here on my cell phone, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Something I've never had to do before." And he said, "What's that?" And I said, "Write a letter donating money to a cause." I said, usually we had such poor budget issues in the small dying congregations in Upper Adams that it was difficult to set money aside to donate. Like the particular letter I was writing here was for WellSpan and UPMC. We decided to make a donation to them based on their work with the coronavirus victims. And so I never had to write a letter like that before in my ministry. And so it's been so impressive to me that we do that kind of stuff. And the people at the churches I served before have the heart for that, and certainly the impetus for ministry for that, but the budget just didn't allow for that kind of giving from the congregation. So I've just been impressed. I mean, nobody has said to me, "Oh, this is something we struggle with." And I think the virus itself has given us enough to struggle with in terms of our gathering and communication and how we can be together and care for one another without being together. Yeah, that's.
So my next question then is, what's your biggest hope for our congregation?
My biggest hope is that we can continue to navigate this pandemic together, that we can continue to figure out ways to be together that are electronic or a phone chain so that nobody's left out. I think I lay awake at night worrying about messages not being received and things being not complete and people being left out. And so I worry about that. But not only that, I hope that we can continue to work together to make good plans for reopening when we do start to hold public worship again. And that could be a very long time, just given recommendations and the nature of what we do. I mean, I don't see us opening for public worship at least until the green phase, and even then, I think it's going to be tough because we'll still have to observe distancing, and we'll still have to be disinfecting after every gathering, and we'll still we almost have to put barriers up between pews so we don't breathe on one another. We can't sing even with masks on because of the way the virus could spray through the air. There's just so much. So I hope that we can continue to have Christ as our focus and be loving our neighbors and loving one another in ways that can allow us to truly take the time that's needed to do this right, so we don't put anyone in harm's way.
That's a wonderful hope to have. And I hope it happens soon.
I know. Yeah. I hope it happens soon too. Something So, yeah, I wish I had all the easy answers for how we can be nourished while we're isolated. That's rough.
No. But in the meantime, we must have faith and hope and pray hard that this time goes quickly and we're able to meet again soon.
Yeah.
In person.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Pastor Susan. It was a wonderful interview with you. I hope it helps a lot of people get to know you a little better.
Thank you.
And God be with you.
God be with you too.